Okay, marker.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Bobbi Rebell. I'm a TV anchor and personal finance columnist at Thomson Reuters, and I am here with Shannon Schuyler. She is the head of corporate responsibility and chief purpose officer at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She is also president of the PwC Foundation. Since 2012, Shannon has led a $190 million commitment to Earn Your Future. That is PwC's signature program focused on helping students develop critical financial literacy skills. It's an amazing program. Just today, PwC revealed the results of a big new study that they did with George Washington University's Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, got that right, on millennials and personal finance. I got a sneak peek at it. It was jaw-dropping. There's a lot of really interesting facts, and I'm excited to talk to Shannon about it.
Well, I'm excited to be here with you. I mean, you're kind of a notable in the whole area of financial literacy.
Yes.
So for you to say it's jaw-dropping, I'm
is,
very excited.
And we have a column that we worked on together that came out today that we've been tweeting about, so you can check that out too. Let's start though with what I think was the biggest headline here, which is the lack of financial literacy among millennials. This is something that I thought would have gotten better because there's so much information out there on the internet, but not so much.
No, really not so much. I mean, what we really found is only about 24% of the millennials out there are really able to just understand basics around financial literacy. And so understand mortgages, numeracy, some of the basic things. And 8%, which is very few people, know even something around inflation or risk diversification or any of kind of the more sophisticated topics, but topics that are critical as they move through their careers and into adult life and families, et cetera. And so it was very alarming to know that even over the years where states have really mandated financial literacy training at least one course before students are graduating from high school, it hasn't changed behaviors. And so I think that was something that was troubling.
So what do you think is going on? Are people just in denial and just kind of thinking, well, if I just don't do anything, it'll work out?
Well, I think a couple things are happening. I think students are graduating from college with debt that they didn't think they had. And so here at the end of the day, they're suddenly realizing that here's the debt that I've accumulated and I have to start paying my student loans immediately. And they haven't necessarily sat down to say, okay, when I graduate, I'm going to have the debt from the first credit card that I got in college. I'm going to have to start paying off my student loans immediately. This is the career that I'm in. This is how much money I'm going to make. I'm going to now want to live in the same way that I lived with my parents. And so now I have rent to pay, I have my car to have, I have the gym membership, and they're all of a sudden realizing that it doesn't add up. And it's kind of the first time they're thinking of that, and so immediately they're trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Right, well, they're used to a certain lifestyle with their parents, and there's this sort of disconnect because they don't have the income in pretty much any case when they get out of school to live the way they're used to.
Right, and I think millennials also in such a good trait that they have live for the now. Right, they live for the now, they live for the experiences that they want to have. And so they're really focused on what is that experience while I'm in it now versus necessarily thinking about what it's going to be 10, 15 years down the road.
But then they have to pay for it. And one thing that I saw in the survey, and that's what I really focused my column on today, was the fact that they were making some really unwise choices.
No,
in where they went to get the money.
Big changes in their choices. And so, they're looking at alternative financial services. And so they're looking at payday loans much more. They're starting to look at pawn shops. They're looking at rent to own. They're even taking advances out on their tax return dollars. And so they're looking at a lot of things in order to get money quickly because they already have credit card debt and about 30% already have overdrawn bank accounts. Right. And so they're entering in to now find out these additional sources. And I was most surprised that even though about 50% of the millennials who are using the payday loans and using the pawn shops have not attended college, about 30% have. And so this is something that people, whether you're educated or not, are really going to these alternative, really a little bit more risky services to use.
But they're not talking about it. I know when I was trying to do research for this column, nobody would admit it. I did finally find somebody that would talk to me anonymously, but for considering 28% of college-educated people in the survey have used one of these alternative financial services, nobody will admit it. And I think that kind of we have to be a little more transparent.
No, I agree. I think one of the other troubling findings is they're not talking about it. And so whether it's because there's concern that it's only them, and so they don't want to be the outlier that these things are happening to, whether they're embarrassed, whether they think they can kind of kick the can further down and it'll all be okay, like the first bonus they get or something will happen to kind of transform their situation, but they're not talking about it. And they're definitely not talking about it to any kind of true professionals. They're not seeking out that advice either through their banks or even through a lot of things online.
You mentioned online. There's so much information available online for this generation more than ever before. And there's a lot of these standard things that people are told have a certain number of months of savings in case something happens, whether it's 2 months just for a short-term thing. Really 6 to 9 months is considered ideal these days, and yet I think a very high percentage couldn't even come up with $2,000 if they needed to.
No, it was absolutely amazing. Only about 50% could say that they could come up with $2,000 if they needed to with a financial hardship. And I think we all know financial hardships, and you're kind of lucky if it's a $2,000 financial hardship. Right. And so that old adage of making sure to put dollars away and to be able to keep it there really isn't there. And again, when you find out how people are trying to get money now, right? Because they already have maxed out a lot of what they have, it makes sense that they would have no idea where to be able to go for $2,000 additional dollars.
Right, and so let's just say, and it would not be a great choice, but they could go to a 401k, but many of them aren't even on top of their own retirement savings. And this survey, by the way, was 23-year-olds to 35-year-olds. So these are some people, a good part of this survey are people that are really grown-ups. They are in their 30s, they are presumably in some cases married, maybe they have children, and yet retirement doesn't seem to be a priority.
No, I mean only about 36% have actually taken advantage of the retirement programs that their organizations have. And 20% within the last year have already borrowed against that. So they're really using them more as savings accounts versus longer term accounts. And so, it also is interesting though, because now you're in a generation that the average life expectancy at someone actually at an organization for a millennial is 18 months. And so there might be people thinking, why, it takes me 2 years in order to get the match, so I'm not going to put any money in there until I get the match, and they leave before the match comes, and because they are into so many jobs. I mean, I'm sure there's all of these rationale, but we're trying to figure out, why would you not take? That's free money once you get that match.
Well, because they're thinking of the short term.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people have benefits at companies that they may not know about that could possibly help them. I mean, PwC has a new student loan benefit, for example.
We do. I mean, one of the things, and we added it directly to our benefits. We didn't say this is a special program. We said this is kind of a part of being here and something that we think that you deserve when you come in. And it's because of the crushing loans that students have. And 54% of the students, the millennials really said one of the things that they're most concerned about is how in the world to pay off their student loans. And so now we have it that when you come into the firm within your first 5 years, we'll pay up to $10,000 off your loan just to give you, first of all, the sense of knowing how to start paying it off. And so they can see what's being done, but then also just to take off some of the burden off the top.
Well, it's also, and people don't talk about it. So this way it becomes something that's out there that they're talking about with their peers. It becomes part of the conversation, and it makes it a little bit easier psychologically to say, yes, I have this loan, but this is what I'm doing.
No, absolutely. And what's so frustrating is if schools and if parents and if all of us started talking about this when students were in second grade, third grade, first job that you have, first time you mow the lawn, first time, you get money from somebody in your family, then this would be an easier conversation. Unfortunately, those things haven't happened steadily, and even if one course was taken, that certainly wasn't going to be able to cover you for everything that would go on, and you're not going to remember those specific details when you actually need them. And without that constant education, you're just not going to be able to change a lot of these behaviors.
Let's take a question from Twitter. Somebody wrote to us, what can companies, nonprofits, and others do to help more kids become financially capable, which is really what you were just talking about.
No, absolutely. I think companies really can invest in financial training for their own employees. I mean, many companies now have very robust programs that allow their employees to ask questions, allow their employees to really understand different financial products that are out there, allow them to really be linked up with people who can help them in a very safe type of environment. And then I also think helping them to pay off loans, really realizing that so many students come in and before people were coming out of college with $4,000 and $5,000. I mean, the average of $35,000 up to $140,000. I mean, you think about how you're going to pay that off on a starting salary, even of $75,000. I mean, even substantial starting salaries, you can't do that unless your employer is really willing to kick in.
Well, and as you point out, I mean, that is a very high salary. That's not a typical salary to have $75,000. So the average person coming out they're living a much more modest lifestyle than they might be used to, and there's a real disconnect.
No, absolutely. And again, I think it's having individuals who came from a lifestyle when they were with their parents, have always thought, this generation has always thought that they would live better than their parents. And so at the very least, they want to be able to have those standards. Well, in this day and age, those standards really are costly, and those standards become more costly when you have different debt that you're actually coming into that relationship with.
I think it's interesting also, this generation is one that is not necessarily buying as much stuff, but they're very focused on experiences and lifestyle. And you mentioned health clubs, which is a perfect example. That's something that where their friends may all be going to the health club, they don't want to not have that membership, or their friends may all be going to a destination wedding and they feel that they have to go, so then they're charging it, or even worse, maybe they're going and getting, pawning something and getting a loan, that kind of thing. I mean, where do you go with that? Well, that's their life.
I know, and it's having to trade-offs, right? I mean, all these things come with trade-offs. There's a lot of things that I would like, but I'm not going to be able to do that if I also want my son to be able to go to the school that I want him to go to. I mean, there's a lot of trade-offs that you have to have, and I think those are the hard lessons, and it's really hard to learn that lesson when you're 25, right? I mean, it would be easier to learn that lesson when you're in junior high and in high school, that you have to give and take, and sometimes you get more ahead and do the things you want, and other times you actually have to wait for things. But it's interesting, and I think that really gets to the notion of why people are using pawn shops. I don't think that the material things tend to be of value. Right, and so it's easier to take a thing to be pawned, to go do an experience, than vice versa.
Right.
And so that probably makes that a more viable decision to make, to go to that type of alternate financial system.
I also think it's interesting, we talk about getting to kids at young ages, but then we have this college where we have 18 to 22-year-olds who don't necessarily get financial education. They're learning other things, but I don't think a lot of colleges say, okay, you're majoring in this subject and you're taking out this amount of loans. Maybe that's not a match. Maybe if you're going to major in finance or economics, you can take out a bigger loan, but if you're going to major in social work, you should think about what your career is going to be. I mean, we don't really have that conversation with freshmen in college and make a matchup about their realistic earning potential and the loans that they're taking out to get the degree.
No, we don't. We have an app currently that's out there that allows students and parents to be able to go in to say, this is the career I want, this is where I want to live, and this is a college I want to go to, and determine the cost, determine the loan amount. And we've actually had students come back to say, oh, well, that's not then, if that's the career that I want, then it doesn't make sense for me to go to that school because I'm never going to be able to pay it off for what I'm going to do. But very few actually have that, and there's not a lot that's done with colleges. We've really talked about how to actually get now into the colleges to have this be a part of the discussion and really be able to teach this. But that's a hard one because figuring out how you fit into the large academic world is a challenging one.
And of course, college is also the place where, as we've discussed, people get student debt and they get credit cards, and that's kind of where they start out behind the 8 ball. Do you feel that colleges have a responsibility to be more proactive about that education?
I do. I mean, I think that there's so much that goes on a college campus. There's really so many things that are focused on when you're at the corner, you can get a new credit card if you get a team jersey. I mean, they equate like getting credit cards with fun things that happen on college, and maybe that's something that the college needs to look at to really start to get their hand around. If these are the same students who also have significant loans that they're taking out, how is that going to work for them at the end?
Exactly. Well, one thing people can do, and A Firm wrote us a comment asking, are millennials living in cheaper cities? And that is one thing that people could think about, is if you want to have a nice lifestyle, maybe you don't have to live in a major metropolitan area that's very expensive.
No, absolutely. And it's funny, in the past, that people used to go to where the jobs are. And now what we're really finding is the jobs are coming to where the people are, right? And so in Austin, Texas, and in other places that might have a lower living standard as far as what things cost, you're having people now flock there, right? Because of the weather, because of the cost of living, and now you have big companies that are going and starting their operations there. So the millennials really are changing where companies are even headquartered and where companies really have their various different plants and operations. And I think part of that is because they're saying this is where we want to live for these variety of reasons, and a lot of it isn't the bigger cities that come with the heftier price tags.
And they want the nice lifestyle, and maybe this is a good compromise where they can have the activities and the social life that they want, but maybe live a little bit more in their means, and that would be a good thing. So with that, thank you so much. much, Shannon.
Thank
This
you.
was
It's
great.
always a pleasure. I really look forward to speaking with you again.
And thank you, everyone on Periscope that tuned in. And more details on the study, I think we will be tweeting it out, sending it out so people can learn a little bit more about this. Thank you.
Thanks.